Yeah. Okay. So we're going to have parents start those. Okay. Yeah, it's just Facebook Live. Facebook Live. Okay.
I know nothing about it. I just hear it.
Jinny Suh, running for land commissioner. Go ahead, Jinny.
Hello, everyone. For those in the back that may not have heard, my name is Jinny Suh, and I'm running for Texas Land Commissioner. This is a statewide race. I'm coming to you today as a fighter, a community organizer, and an activist. Those are the things I hope you'll remember when you go home today. I'm a licensed attorney, a former teacher. I am a small business owner and a working mom to 2 public school kids aged 5 and 9. But most notably in my recent past, I've been known around the state for being the founder and leader of Immunize Texas, a pro-vaccine movement. I'm very happy to be coming masks here today. This is a pro-vaccine grassroots advocacy group. So I've been at the Texas State Capitol for 6 years before pandemic, fighting for better public health care policy, specifically around vaccines. And I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with an anti-vaxxer, but if you have, you know that I'm not afraid of a fight and I don't give up when things are hard. I also want to share a little bit about my upbringing. I think that's an important part of why I'm running for this seat. I did not come to this country, my parents did not come to this country because they were wealthy or they had a scholarship to Rice University or anything like that. They came here with almost nothing. And they came here to build a better life for themselves and their family. So I actually struggled quite a bit as a child. I grew up without health insurance. I grew up in a small rural town of about 10,000 people where I was treated as an other. And I also watched my parents lose their plant nursery business when droughts ravaged our town. And a lot of the statewide Democrats right now, we're talking about climate change. And this is important to me because from that experience, I know that climate change can hurt people. It causes suffering. People lose businesses, people can't put food on the table. And that's why it's such an important problem for us to get in front of. Now, I'm talking about all kinds of things that the general, well, first of all, let me ask, does anyone know what the General Land Office does? Okay, a few people? Great. That's usually what I see is just a few people in the crowd. So I'm just going to run through the laundry list of things that the General Land Office does. First of all, just want to clarify, it's not about things like state parks. It's not about, hiking in the field. This is about managing an 800-plus person agency that does the following things. They have the chance there to make Texas a greener place because we manage all the state lands. So on the coastal bend, it's about oil and gas. In the western parts of the state, it's about mineral rights. And the money that comes out of that, those contracts, those leases, it funds our public schools through the Permanent School Fund, as well as veterans benefits. Other things that the General Land Office does, Federal Disaster Relief Fund distribution, long-term disaster relief fund. So if you're ever in a situation where your house is damaged because of a hurricane or a flood, those funds that are going to help you rebuild, they go from the federal government to the General Land Office, and then the Land Commission decides how that money gets distributed. The Land Office also manages the Alamo and protects our environment. Now, no matter what we're talking about, with all of these different responsibilities, what I think we need is a land commissioner that has the vision, the strength, and the backbone to take action and put policies in place that put people first. Right now, we don't have that. We have a land commissioner that is just using this office so they can run for something else, currently Attorney General, and as a result, people have been left behind. There are folks in Houston right now, for instance, they have never gotten their money to rebuild after Hurricane Harvey. And it's been how many years?
4.5 months.
That's unbelievable. It's really reprehensible. This is not the kind of administration that I would, engage in. This is not what I would want to do as land commissioner. So there's a number of reasons why I think you should vote for me, but I also want to address the importance of diversity. 95% of our growth in Texas has come from people of color. And Asian Americans are the fastest growing demographic. Yet I'm the only Asian American running statewide in Texas. This is also the first time that we had a chance to get the first woman land commissioner in Texas. And I think it's because of all those reasons, my leadership skills, my experience, integrity, and the importance I represent for the future, that I've gotten the endorsements from a lot of people that I admire and organizations that I'm proud to be endorsed by. So people like Representative Donna Howard, Aaron Zwiener, these are the folks that have been leading the fight for women, for all the progressive causes that we believe in. And then organizations like Texas AFL-CIO has endorsed me. I'm incredibly, thank you. I'm incredibly proud to have their endorsement, and I've been working with them on their Texas Climate Jobs Project, because while we transition to having more renewables in our energy grid, it's important that we don't leave Texans behind. They need to have access to good quality, high-paying jobs as we move towards a greener future. And then finally, we just got this news today while we were driving here. I'm so happy to announce that I have been endorsed by Annie's List. So incredibly proud. And I will point out one other reason why this is so important in this race, in this cycle, this time. The most likely Republican nominee for land commissioner, it's not a man. It's a woman, State Senator Dawn Buckingham. And if you're familiar with her, you'll know that she's a hard right conservative. You know what she wants to do with our state lands? She wants to use as much of them as possible to build a border wall. Okay? This is who we're talking about. And you know who is the best person to go against a hard right conservative woman like that? A strong, progressive, democratic woman like myself. So, the biggest part of this campaign, this is a grassroots campaign. I don't come from money. I don't have family connections. I'm relying on everyone here to not only tell people to get out the vote, but share my name, Jinny Suh, for Texas Land Commissioner. So that's my speech. I hope I've earned your support. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have questions, I'll be here for a little while before I go back into the minivan and do some Zoom. So thank you very much for your time.
Jenny, we have time for you to answer some questions right now.
Does anyone have any questions?
What can you do environmentally to protect the environment?
So, especially in this area, I'm assuming that a lot of you are concerned about storm surges, flooding. So there are a lot of developments that are happening with storm surges. And my thing is, do we know that they will actually work? It's one thing to say, okay, we're going to build this Ike Dike or whatever you have proposed. But there isn't a whole lot of evidence yet about whether or not it will work. And this is where I think you need someone like me who has a science-based approach that uses facts and evidence to evaluate what's the best decision for Texas. Because the last thing we want to do is invest a bunch of money and have it not work. Okay, so in terms of the storm surges, that's one thing. The other things that we can do to protect our environment, coastal wetlands are incredibly sensitive. As someone that is trained in ecology and biology, I know that. And so I'm somebody that wants to, again, bring in experts, bring in the science perspective, but not in a way where it's a counter to business interests. We have to balance both to benefit Texas. And I'm the person that can do it. I have, again, with Immunize Texas, for instance, I have worked with Republicans, I have worked with independents, I work with all kinds of different people all across the state. And I managed to get them to sit down together and talk about what's important so that we can come up with an action plan that moves us forward. I want to do that when it comes to our environment. I want to do that when it comes to climate change. We can't sit around and argue anymore. We need to get to work if we're going to get in front of climate change and protect our environment. So my approach is bring in those experts, bring in people who know from the ground what needs to be done, bring in private sector, have everyone sit down and talk about it. And really, at this point, I see the signs that all these actors are ready to sit down. We just need the government piece to put it all together. And that's my plan as the next planning commissioner.
Jinny, Dr. Dare has a question.
Hi. Yes.
AFL-CIO, but we're very concerned in Corpus Christi because they're considering desalinization in the bay. And we know that that's not good for the environment. What kind of stance or what kind of action will you take to prevent the deterioration of our bay in Corpus Christi and the surroundings?
So again, I think what happens is people propose something, there's the attraction of jobs, there's the money investment, and people get distracted from what's important. So I think when it comes to any of the technologies we've heard proposed, whether it's desalination or carbon capture, I've heard all of them. My question is, as somebody with a science background, is it good for the environment? Is it something we can actually even scale up to make a difference? And I'll be honest, I don't think that there's enough data on some of these technologies to say yes or no, because Texas hasn't really taken the time to investigate. So that's somewhere where I would be coming in and really talking with people and finding out what the consensus is. Now, desalination, I mean, this is something that when we're talking about water, we have to be very, very careful. Texas is running out of water, no matter where you are in the state. So we have to be really careful not to damage the water that we already have to make sure that we ensure that Texans have access to good quality water. And of course the environment. Again, I know how delicate our coastal areas are, and there is so much development happening. I would be someone that wants to hold companies accountable in a real way, not just something that they check off a box and say, oh, I built some mitigation wetland over here and it's fine. We know that's not really how it works. That's not how ecology works. And so we need to talk about it in a meaningful way with the scientific expertise of people who really know what should be done. Yeah.
Jenny, could we be like desalinating and purifying treated sewage water and sending that to industry instead of desalinating salt water?
It's a complicated process, I think, and so again, and there would have to be the issue of scale. What I do know is that we need to investigate it, and certainly right now, a lot of the things that are being proposed technology-wise, while they might make us greener, they're going to damage our water system and our supply. So, for instance, I can bring up the example of some of the carbon capture technologies out there. Sounds great on paper, but it actually requires a lot of water in that process, that chemical process, that can actually be tainted and not be reusable for drinking water. So these are the kinds of things. Again, what I don't want to do is get so hyper-focused on one goal that we forget all the other goals. That's how we get into trouble. And as a state, we have this sort of record of constantly being reactive and not thinking proactively because we get caught up with the money, we get caught up with wanting to sound good in the newspapers, and losing sight of what's really important.
How about our wetlands being thrown all around here?
That's another issue. I mean, whether you're talking about SpaceX or storm surge barriers, I mean, these are all things that I'm afraid that we are rushing ahead. And the biggest concern I have is it will be for nothing if they don't actually work.
Yeah. Anybody else have any other questions for Jenny?
I do. I was just wondering how you would figure that you could put the teeth into the GLO when no one else has been able to.
So I do have an extensive background in law and looking at contracts and negotiating hard. And I'm a fighter. I'm an advocate. So for me, I know I have to partner with oil and gas to get the job done. There's no way around that. But I'm someone that wants to put in lease clauses, contractual clauses that hold them to task.
And you realize what you're up against.
I do. And that's the challenge that any lay commissioner is going to have in front of them. What I can assure you is that I'm a good Democrat.
A lot of them don't care.
Well, for the last 20 plus years, they haven't cared. As I said, they've used this office to just show up, clock in, clock out, and then eventually run for something else. So I want this job. I want to tell you, this is something that I want. It's important to me. And I'm a good Democrat. So that's another thing I would say. I know we're talking about land office, we're talking about what the land commissioner does. I think at this point things have gotten so bad that we need to hold our elected officials to a higher standard. They need to be advocates for all of our democratic values. So if you're looking for a land commissioner that will be at a protest, to protest against SB 8 or SB 1, that's me. That's who I am. Probably 5 minutes, but I could, well, my Zooms are going to last a while.
All right, well, thank you for coming, thanks for talking to everybody.
Yes.
Everybody.
One more question.
Yes.
What's your vision for the Veterans Land Board?
Okay, so the Veterans Land Board, so I have to look at the contracts that are in place there because they're constantly doing land deals, but my biggest concern is that the veterans that I've talked to all over the state, they have no idea about the benefits that are managed by the land office. They don't know about the home loans, the home improvement loans. They don't know about the long-term care facilities. They don't know about the veteran cemeteries managed by the office. So my whole thing is, what good is a program on paper if no one knows about it? So what I want to do is engage in a very aggressive outreach campaign so that more veterans will be informed about the benefits that are available. And I also want to focus on making sure that those programs are accessible to them. So making it easier for them to apply, cutting red tape, cutting out the bureaucracy, so that people can actually take advantage of what's out there. And Lacey will be here. She is happy to speak on my behalf, if you have to a certain extent, I guess. And sometimes sign-in sheet, if you could sign up so we can send you newsletters. And if anyone wants my business card, it's over there as well. And you can always reach out to me. I'm very accessible by email and text. So please feel free if you have any questions, reach out.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you.